Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. This podcast is dedicated to EAS employees of the U.S. Postal Service and members of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode. And now, here's your host, Robert Wakefield.
Good morning, Branch 32, and good morning to all of our EAS friends across the country. Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. I'm your host, Robert Wakefield, president of Branch 32. That's right. I'm the president. Okay, that's enough. Got a great show lined up for you, so let's go ahead and pour that first cup. Hey, Nashville Postal employees, the summer sizzle's almost over, but your sweet tooth still has time to shine. It's the final days of free ice cream at the Nashville Post Office Credit Union, and we're scooping up smiles all August long. Did you hear that, Brian Wagner? You've got the month of August. You better hurry. Whether you're a longtime member or a new member of the credit union, swing by for a cool treat and learn what makes the Nashville Post Office Credit Union your hometown financial hero, from low rates to hometown service. But hurry, August melts away fast, and so does the ice cream. Join us before the last scoop drops. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, people helping people since 1925. And for our first cup today, I thought I would kind of bounce off what we did for the last podcast, talking about a boss versus a leader. And I thought what I would do today is give you a personal story of what happened to me when I had to deal with a leader as opposed to dealing with a boss. So I was a brand new, this was 1986, and I was a brand new window clerk there. And for those of you who work the window now, we had to do our own 1412s. It was a manual 1412. We didn't have computers. We weighed things on scales. Yes, it was it was 1,000 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. And so what we did was we had to do a manual 1412. We had to sign it at the bottom and do all the figures. We had to, put in our money orders, the money order fees and everything else. And then the last thing we would figure up was how many stamp sales we had. And that's how we made our deposits. It's way different now. The computer POS ones, they do all that for you. But back in the day, we had to do that on our own. We had to fill it out each day. Now, the OIC that I had was a very patient guy, really wanted me to learn. He knew I was new, but he really wanted me to learn what it was like to be a window clerk. And one of the requirements that we had to do is we had to round date the top portion of our 1412. You pick up the round dater, you hit it with the ink, you put it on the 1412, and you lay that and all your paperwork on the postmaster's desk at the end of the night. And the next day, the postmaster would come in and he would consolidate. He would do a consolidated manual 1412 for the office, for the unit. And that's what he would turn in each night. So this was way back in the day before computers came along and took over the world, basically. It's a lot. When the 1412s being generated now on the POS ones, they're fabulous. But this was kind of an ordeal for a postmaster when it was back in 1986. But I had the problem as a brand new clerk. I had the ongoing problem of forgetting to round date the upper part of the 1412. And he'd come out there and he said, Robert, you forgot to round date the 1412. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, Mr. Smith. I did it again. I have to change the date. I'd have to go back and change the date and put yesterday's date on it and stamp it and then change the date back to today's date, and off he would go in his office. Well, he did that several times. He came back out there and says, Robert, you forgot to round date your 1412 last night. Oh, Mr. Smith, I don't know why I can't remember to do that. I just don't understand. And he just smiled, not get upset. Just I would change the round dater to the day before and stamp it and hand it back to him. Well, one day he decided that he had had just about enough of that, and it was time for me to take a lesson on what it was like to be a leader. So he asked me into his office. He said, Robert, can I see you in the office for a second? I said, sure. So I went in there, and in the office he had the bulk slips, the 013 pads that we still use. He had bulk slips on the desk. He had a round dater, and he had some ink. And he said, well, I brought you in here because I want you to pick up that round dater, and I want you to hit that bulk slip. So I picked up the round dater, put it into the ink, and I hit the bulk slip. He said, do it again. So I picked up the round dater, I put it in the ink, and I did it again. He said, do it 3 more times. So I did that 3 more times. And I'm starting to laugh because this is just, I'm sitting in a postmaster's office and I am round dating a piece of paper. And when I got done with that exercise, he looked at me and he said, now that you've been fully trained, I don't ever expect you to forget to round date your 1412. And you know what? I didn't. That was a great way of teaching me how to do what he needed me to do. It was him being a leader instead of being a boss. Now, here's the funny thing. You fast forward from 1986 to 2000, and I think it was 2009 when I became a supervisor. And I had a carrier that would constantly, we have to check the vehicles every night to make sure that the doors are locked and the handbrake is set. Well, he would lock the door, but he wouldn't set the handbrake. And I remembered my friend, Mr. Smith. So, after telling the carrier several times that he needs to set that handbrake, and he didn't do it, I decided it was time to show off that leadership skill that I learned from Mr. Smith. So I got the carrier, brought him outside, and said, hop up in there in the LLV. And he said, okay. And I looked at him and I said, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to release that handbrake. And he released the handbrake. I said, set that handbrake. Well, he had this puzzled look on his face. What am I doing here? And he set the handbrake. I said, release the handbrake 3 more times. And he did it 3 more times. He released it, he set it. He released it, he set it. And then I looked right at him and I said, Ben, now that you've been fully trained, I fully expect you to set that handbrake every night. Well, he busted out laughing and he says, okay, I think I can do that now. I say, well, good. And you know what? From that day forward, I'm talking from that day forward, he never failed to set his handbrake. So I learned a valuable lesson that day. Being a boss is not always the way that you need to go about your daily business. Being a leader is. There are times that we have to be a boss. There are times that we have to make decisions that are not going to be popular. But there are also times where we can take a situation and turn it into a learning situation to where there's no controversy and yet the same thing takes place. We get the results we want. And that's the difference between being a boss and being a leader. Now, I'm going to tell you, my years in the Postal Service, I worked in the Postal Service for 35. Those years in the Postal Service when I had a boss was when I was the most miserable in my job. There was no way around it. I hated it. Hated coming in. Hated to see the person who was being the boss of me and just managing my every move. Hated it. But I respected a leader. I respected someone who came in that knew we all had a job to do. He expected us to do it, and he was willing to help, or she was willing to help any way that they could. That's what I'm hoping that you will become in your quest as an EAS. I hope you will become a leader and not be a boss. Let's go ahead and pour that second cup. Hey, Nashville Postal employees, the summer sizzle's almost over, but your sweet tooth still has time to shine. It's the final days of free ice cream at the Nashville Post Office Credit Union, and we're scooping up smiles all August long. Did you hear that, Brian Wagner? You've got the month of August. You better hurry. Whether you're a longtime member or a new member of the credit union, swing by for a cool treat and learn what makes the Nashville Post Office Credit Union your hometown financial hero, from low rates to hometown service. But hurry, August melts away fast, and so does the ice cream. Join us before the last scoop drops. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, people helping people since 1925. And for our second cup, I had mentioned in the last podcast the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Postal Service and how they have a digital site where you can go and check out some things. And so I decided, well, I'll go in here and give you a kind of a preview of what is in here. And I discovered that it's USPS.com/250 is where you find that. And there is a section in here that's called the Postmasters with the longest known continuous service at the same post office. Okay, so here we are. So I'll give you from 5 until 1. Let's see, I think that's 5, right? Mary Stewart from Oxford, Maryland. She served 63 years from 1877 to 1940. Archie L. Wardeska from Irondale, Ohio, served as postmaster at that office for 64 years, 1933 to 1997. Edward S. Crumley? I don't know what that word is. From Reddig, South Dakota. He served 65 years at the same post office, 1949 to 2015. John Van Zant from Blowenberg, New Jersey, served 69 years at the same post office from 1866 to 1935. But the postmaster who had served more than any of them was a guy by the name of Roswell Beardsley. And he was appointed postmaster at the North Lansing, New York post office in 1828 at the age of 18. And he served there until his death in 1902, and he died at the age of 93. He ran the post office in his small country store. He was well loved by his patrons and some of whose families he served for 5 generations, 74 years at the same office. I think that's a record that's going to be pretty safe, don't you? Wow, 74 years. That's amazing. So go check that out at USPS.com/250 for that and other information. I thought that'd be kind of fun to share that. So Thank you so much for listening to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. Now, go in there and check that out. The website is SaturdayCupOfJoe.podbean.com. Leave your comments there, or you can send me an email if you want. I want to know where you're listening from and what you do. So get in touch with the show. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Robert Wakefield, and remember, every great weekend starts with a great cup of Joe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Robert Wakefield and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. We welcome your questions and comments, so send those to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com.